The next item up is consideration to provide a review and referral to the planning board by this town board for a proposed senior housing development and public outdoor sports facility to be located at 875 Publishers Parkway, per town code 225-19.18, subject 1. This is why your packet tonight, board members, Ali and Charlie, is so thick, because it really is comprised by this application. And I think two of the gentlemen that are here tonight, Matt Newcomb and
Corey. Yep.
Would you two like to come up and at least explain this before we jump into it?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board. I'm Corey Auerbach from the law firm of Barkley Damon, joined by Matt Newcomb, the engineers for the project. We're here on behalf of Publishers Parkway Partners to present an initial development plan for the proposed development of 875 Publishers Parkway. I'm sure you're all familiar with the site, but to orient you, this is across from the hotel on Hard Road, north of the 104 exit, and also across from Willett Middle School on Publishers Parkway. And I'm the newbie to this development. I know that this has been before the board in several iterations through the years, the redevelopment of this parcel. And Matt's going to talk a little bit about the history. But essentially what we're proposing is a multifamily market rate senior housing development on 17.6 acres of the approximately 25 acre parcel. That will be 190 units spread over 19 10-unit, two-story buildings, along with a clubhouse and pool. And that's the residential component of the project. And then we're proposing a recreational component of the project, which includes a recreational facility that will take access from Publishers Parkway, along with a walking trail that will connect the school district properties to the Route 104 trail system. So the recreational component will be accessed from Publishers Parkway, and the residential component will be accessed exclusively from Hard Road. In order to bring forward the development, we need a number of approvals from various town agencies, including this town board, which would be the creation of a PDD to allow us to have the multifamily use on the property subject to a special use permit. So we are asking for, in addition to presenting the application this evening, a referral to the planning board for their recommendation on the PDD, and then a special use permit, site plan approval from the planning board, and a special use permit from the town board. The property will be accessed, the residential component, from the existing access for the new URMC building. So it's an existing access off of Hard Road, which will be accessed to the rear over an easement that was reserved by the owner when they developed the URMC property. But that's the highlight. We're here again for a referral to start the process of the PDD in furtherance of the special use permit for multifamily, and of course the heavy lift with the planning board for site plan approval. But just to show you where we started and where we've come, I'm going to ask Matt just to take you quickly through the different iterations that this property has been before you previously.
Thank you. Matt Newcomb, Pastor Associates. I have to tell you guys kind of had me in the shed when we were talking about the sheds. Anyway, thank you for the introduction, Corey. I'll kind of go through the process because this project's kind of a long-standing project from all the way back to 2013. The initial project had a density of 210 units. It did not have that U-Bar parcel in it. This particular development right here, this included several one-story townhouse buildings and a three-story, I believe there's 75 units in the three-story building in the center. So this project was approved by received site plan approval as well as a special use permit in the PDD back in 2013, 2014 time. We went through a series of extensions to the point where we kind of exhausted our extensions, and the project just kind of sat for a while.
This
So-
is for the URMC development with access off Publishers and off Harbor.
Correct. So then we came back in February of 2020 to this board, which some of you might remember this, it's a lot more recent. This proposal had 194 units. It also included that parcel for the U of R, URMC down here in the corner. It also always had this access road that came in, and this also included access off of Publishers Parkway. When we presented this particular project to this board and the planning board, there were some concerns with the proposal of the 4-story buildings in the center. The initial goal for this was to kind of shrink down the development area and create a lot of green space. But because of some of the resistance with the 4-story building, that's kind of how we were getting to where we are now. Also, the 2 access points from Publishers and Hard Road, there was a concern with the Publishers Parkway access point with traffic. So we then kind of progressed into more or less of an as-of-right plan of what could we actually do here as of right without a special use permit for seniors. I don't know, I know this was informally presented to some town staff, and there was some discussion, but it was never formally presented to this board. This provided about 217,000 square feet of office space, which is really what in a lot of use for this particular parcel. So then that takes us to March of 2022, which is our current proposal. As Corey mentioned, we've eliminated that access off of Publishers Parkway for the project, providing an amenity for the town with the soccer field or recreational field rather, and the trail that goes through the property, which has always really kind of been something that's been on the eye of this board, is to have connectivity from the school to the trail system along World 4. So this project doesn't have any buildings over 2 stories tall. Approximately 20 to 30 feet tall with the peaks of the roofs on the buildings, but they will only be a 2-story building. And so it really does a good job of, again, shrinking down the development, getting a decent amount of density that's really kind of related to the multi-family code for the town of Webster, that's around 8 units per acre. So that 8 units per acre, we're under that threshold, so that's kind of what we use to set the density based on the acres we have here. So another, again, traffic impacts, we did provide a traffic impact study. It actually was a modification to the initial impact study that we had when we had our initial approval for this project that did not have the URMC building in it. We did get new traffic counts, pre-COVID traffic counts, and updated it based on the density that we're proposing as senior, as well as included the URMC medical facility in those counts. And that would also include any traffic that would be coming out on the peak hour for the recreational field as well. All that information is published by the ITE, Institute of Traffic Engineers, which is really similar to all the traffic engineers and traffic studies draw all their information from that. So that's how the counts were derived, and then from there comes your distribution as to where you think most of the people that are leaving and entering this site are going to come from and go. And obviously the business district being towards the south on the other side of 104, that's where the majority of the distribution from this site would go. With it being a senior facility, you don't see a lot of peak hour traffic from the senior facility. So that's a nice part to this project as it's compared to the office park. Where in office park you see a significant amount of traffic from the peak hour. This particular development could be significantly less than an office park. I guess with that, does this board have any questions for me or for Corey?
I've got some, I'm a town attorney, I've got some questions regarding the process, exactly what you're doing. You you come before us, a couple of years ago, basically, that's when, and you were seeking a PDD, right? And you're doing that again.
We are, yes. We are seeking the creation of a PDD or the formation of a PDD as part of the proposal to authorize the use for the multifamily senior housing. So we're able to meet the objectives of the underlying zoning district as it relates to the bulk and area requirements. So we don't require too many waivers from the actual underlying zoning. But in order to authorize the proposed use for market rate senior housing, the creation of the PDD authorizes us to seek a special use permit from this board to authorize that as a permitted use in this district.
So you're looking for the PDD, and then you're going to be looking for a special use permit for the senior housing.
That's correct.
But you were doing that before.
So the prior proposals also included a residential component. What we've done here is, I was lucky, as I said, I'm a newbie to this project, but I had the benefit of the comments that were received on the prior proposal. So I kind of took a look at this with fresh eyes and was able, with the developer and with the engineering firm, to inject some creativity to maybe come back with a proposal that was a little bit more appropriate for this site, including the elimination of the access to the residential component along Publishers. I drove over there before the meeting. I can understand why the board was concerned about access on Publishers. And so by utilizing the existing access road for the URMC building, that takes all the traffic from the residential component and moves it off of Hard Road as opposed to Publishers. And then it was the idea of concentrating the development, almost like an open space design, where we could cluster the density in the center of the site, hence the opportunity for the residential component, while preserving green space, but at the same time preserving that sort of dense vegetative buffer that already exists around the site, so that we can have adequate screening and make sure that the use is appropriate in relationship to the adjoining properties. So yes, that was a long way of saying we were before you before, seeking a PDD. I think we've just done a little bit better job of melding the applicant's desires with some of the concerns and the vision that the town has for the property moving forward. So procedure. We'll be looking, of course, for the designation of the lead agency, whether it's going to be the town board incidental to its authority to do the PDD or the special use permit, or the planning board incidental to its authority to do the site plan approval. The planning board will, as I understand the code, make a recommendation as it relates to the establishment of the PDD and the special use permit. So we kind of figured we'd come, I would get a chance to introduce myself to you all and introduce the project, receive any input or initial comments on the conceptual development plan, and then hopefully have a referral to the planning board where we can present the project to them and hopefully get a recommendation from them back to the town board on the establishment of the PDD so that we could then request the special use permit.
You're correct in the order in which it moves. It starts here. If the town board agrees, they will send it to the planning board for the PDD. We'll also send it to the planning board for recommendation regarding any special use permit. But that's the first hurdle.
Got it. And yeah, so to that end, the supervisor mentioned a very thick packet. I apologize for overburdening the agenda this evening, but what we did was we tried to give you a flavor for what we were doing. And in doing that, in addition to our letter of intent, I did an analysis of the criteria for the establishment of the PDD, for the special permit criteria, and also just an analysis of the bulk and density requirements for multifamily residential in the underlying zoning district. So I thought it would be helpful as you make a decision on advancing the project to the planning board, just to get a sense of where the applicant stands as it relates to our understanding of entitlement based upon the criteria set forth in the town's code, and welcome the opportunity to provide additional detail or info or discuss those with you now or at a future date.
Having looked at the criteria, and you're referring to the code, right, 22521.
I'm referring, yeah, I'm referring to
That's the criteria for the PDD. Would it be your understanding that it's possible that the PDD would possibly proceed, but the special use permit or not?
I certainly.
I'm not saying that's what you're asking for, I know you want both, but I'm just saying.
I understand.
You do
absolutely.
understand that it's possible that that could happen?
Yes, I do. I understand that those are separate approvals. In this case, the purpose of the PDD is essentially to enable us to ask for your permission to do the senior multifamily housing.
Charlie, you were great because you hit on all the technical, legal things, and I'm sure Corey, you talk because you guys have some language. I'm going to jump in and say a few things, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to just hit some layman things. Within the spirit of how you did the, walk down memory lane of 2013, got approved, and actually, it's funny, last year, February 4th, 2021, I sent out to the board, thanks to Dahlia. I knew this was familiar, and I pulled board minutes from last year. That was 15 months ago. That's when this board voted 5-0 to not issue a special use permit. That was 15 months ago. And as you said, that one was 194 units. It accessed onto the publishers. This one is 192, you said?
190.
190, okay. And accesses hard road and has a field and a trail and all that. Okay. Which, so here's the thing. Some kind of other things to that timeline. One of the first meetings I had when I was supervisor in January or February of 2020 was Jeff Sedal from Pastoral came in with the president, Taylor, the builder, and they showed me this. And they showed me what they ended up ultimately, a year later, got shot down by this board. And I say that because we could say that COVID elongated that process, but your client, Pastoral's client, I don't know if you're the attorney for Pastoral or attorney for Taylor.
No, for the applicant. Yep.
But they went through a bit of a baton death march, as we referred it to the planning board. The planning board did their thing, public hearings, people come to the public hearings. It got back here, and a year later we shot it down 5-0. Now, Charlie, I think the law says that, well, now we're going to talk about 15 months later, you come back with this. Define substantial, right? Such a subjective term. Substantial difference. Like the board, and I can start reading things like Dolly's minutes of what the board members said 15 months ago on February 4th, prior to them voting no. I'll save that for now. But I don't know. I mean, I don't want to take you back through that path, and Charlie, you gave the technical thing, the PDD and all that. It can come back here in 3 to 6 months and suffer the same fate that it did 15 months ago. So I don't know if that's good for anyone. So that's my overall look at this. I also, 2 other things, and then I'll hand it off to my fellow board members to question or comment, is that I don't know how this works, but I know Rich Lefroy is building the U of R, and we're trying to get the CLO on that, and I know for a fact, I'm 99.9% sure, so I'll look to Josh and Mary, that road's a private road. It was built to private road standards. So I guess I'm scratching my head how you'd access in off that road without tearing it up and creating it to be town road standards.
Yeah, so when that parcel was conveyed from the applicant, they reserved an easement for access over that road. So for purposes of reaching the multifamily senior housing development, they have the authority.
So you're not looking for it to be a dedicated road? I got you. Okay. The only other thing I would say, and I did, as you brought up the different placards, this is what we did in 2013, this is what we did in 2021, and you said, oh, we had some private meetings with staff. The office park configuration. That office park configuration that you held up, am I right in assuming you never applied for that, okay, if you did, just theoretically, you probably wouldn't have to come before the, well, I don't know, maybe you come before the town board, but the zoning is office park, so you go before the planning board, it would be built to the specs of the zoning, and
I think so.
you have an office park.
You don't really, I don't think you need the PDD just for that.
I don't think so.
PDD, and the special use permit is because it's senior housing. And that leads me to, like I said, I'll save everybody time, but have you read what we all said 15 months ago? A lot of it had to do with,
I have some questions.
yeah, so I'm going to hand it off to the rest of you.
So we're looking at 19 buildings with proposed 10 units each.
Correct.
Those buildings have a square footprint of 7,600 square feet.
Correct.
Am I to assume that then each unit is somewhere around 760, probably less, considering some walls square feet?
Yeah, that would be for the ground floor, two-story building.
Okay. So it's 14.
There's also garages too, so that would take up a portion of the square footage on the first floor. So probably closer to 900 square feet, something 900 square feet, some 1 unit, some 2 units.
Okay. I have a bit of a concern that there's only one way in and one way out. I'm not sure what New York State or what fire code would say about that. And I'm curious as to this recreation area that you're proposing. Who would be using that?
So that would be an amenity that we're proposing that the applicant would build and presumably lease at a nominal amount, lease for $1 to whoever was going to utilize and maintain those facilities going forward. The idea behind the recreational field is to create a transition from the school to the multifamily development.
So you think someone would look at accepting that gift for a nominal fee of maintaining it?
Yeah, if there was a desire, either the town, the school district, some other entity that wanted to utilize that space for recreational facility. I know that there's soccer fields directly to the, I guess that's the west. Yeah, to the west. And of course the fields across the street and basically on the whole stretch of Publishers with the ice hockey arena and the other uses.
Patty, great point about it. I don't know if the new fire code of the state that we just dealt with a stick-built subdivision, it was something like if you have over 50 units that you have to have 2 access egress.
Yeah, for a development like this, a multifamily senior housing development, I believe the threshold is 200. So as long as the buildings are sprinklered, as one point of ingress egress would comply with the state fire code.
Okay.
That's predicated that the buildings are all sprinkled.
Gotcha. Okay.
I just, one of my concerns last time when you had 194 units was just the traffic. And I know you've done some traffic studies. I don't see we're coming out only to Hard Road and not on the Publishers. That whole corner is a nightmare at times. And it's particularly a nightmare when buses are coming and going. So we're not talking about peak hours, we're not talking about when people leave for work. We're talking about the middle of the day when seniors do want to go out. They've got a doctor's appointment and it might not be at the building right in front, but they have to get out at 2:30 in the afternoon to go somewhere, and there are 50 buses lined up. And it's a difficult area to really commute through. So when I look at this, and I wasn't thrilled with the density last time with 194 units, I can appreciate the fact that you've opened up a lot of green space, if you will. I see a lot of green on this plan. But we only have 4 less units. concerned with that.
Those are fair concerns. I would share your concerns. I think traffic is certainly something that we need to be mindful of, and that was very clear from the comments that the town board had, which was principally what drove removing the access off Publishers Parkway. We did have a traffic study prepared that determined there would be no detrimental impact based upon the proposal. If we need to do some more work surrounding traffic to make the town board comfortable that those impacts won't negatively delay traffic at the intersection of Publishers Parkway and Hard Road, or decrease the level of service to an inappropriate level, that's absolutely something that we would be willing to do, and I think is our obligation to do as part of the review of the project. The density, yeah, you're right, the density didn't change drastically, but the densities within the 8 unit per acre density that you would envision, and that is envisioned under the town's code. What we did was we clustered the density into the center of the site so that we could preserve green space and create that tree buffer that we think helps make the use appropriate in relationship to the other surrounding uses. But I understand those concerns, those are fair concerns. I don't think they're insurmountable concerns. I hope they're not. I think it's something that we can continue to work through with the planning board as part of the site plan process. But there's a benefit to density. There's a benefit to providing appropriate senior housing in an area where it won't have negative impacts on the surrounding. Density is generally, appropriate density is generally something that is sought after for residential projects.
Bill? Virginia?
The last plan they brought in, 194 units, spread over the whole parcel. Now they're bringing us 190 units in a more condensed parcel. I don't see how they're changing this thing from what the other one was. It's still the same number of units, they're using less land to put the units in. I don't see they qualify as a PDD or a substantial difference from what they had before.
Partly to add to what Bill said, I'm having a hard time seeing this and envisioning that over the next 3 months as you go through with the planning board and all that I would have any different vote on this than I had 15 months ago. Which I think is essentially what you're saying. I'm trying to keep an open mind to this, but I'm struggling with it. And I also, because I've said I want customer service in this town, I really didn't like what we dragged Castro and Taylor through last time. And I have this bad feeling that if you want to walk out of here with a victory tonight, you're going to go to the planning board, you're going to go through all that, you're going to end up right back here in 3 months and get a vote that you're not going to get the special use permit.
I understand.
I don't know who that benefits.
I'll be very blunt with you, and I'll tell you what my hope is. And I understand the concern. It was 194 to 190 now. I do see some substantial differences. My opinion isn't one sitting up on the dais, but the removal of the access for this project for Publishers Parkway is a tremendous difference. I drove down Publishers Parkway. There was a lacrosse game going on one field. There was something else going on the other field. It's 25 miles an hour. There were kids all around. I could understand why you would want a residential project of this scale emptying out on Publishers Parkway. That's why eliminating that access, to me, is substantially different than what came to you before. There were also four-story buildings previously that were proposed. So reducing the scale into a more appropriate scale where we can make a transition from those the school and from the recreational uses. We've got hotel on the other side of Hard Road. We've got some office buildings to the north, and then a very nice multifamily development at the intersection of sort of Publishers and Hard Road. The idea here is, let's find a transition. Let's find something that transitions the uses into something that's compatible in scale and in design. By clustering it in the center of the site, it gives that buffer off of Publishers. It buffers the residential use as a transition into a dense but still 2-story residential component.
Well, 140 units.
You know, there's a number, right, that makes a project work for a developer. And I understand, maybe the number that we came in at isn't something that the town is interested in, maybe there's gonna have to be some give and take there, but I'll tell you what my goal is. My goal is to work in partnership with the town, to bring forward a development that furthers the town's objectives, that furthers the objectives in the comprehensive plan, and I provided some specific references to the town's comprehensive plan in the packet that I think this achieves, and do it in a way that addresses the concerns that you have in partnership with the town. And if it means, making some modifications to the project, and the developers can have to make some difficult decisions, but I think that with the benefit of the comments that we received from you the last time, going back to the drawing board, personally, I gave it a look with a fresh set of eyes and came up with some ideas that I thought might be more palatable. With the idea of creating a development that is appropriate in scale and also achieves town's objectives, like promoting green space, connectivity to the Route 104 trail network, and finding appropriate density that fosters the town's commercial district. I think that there's a project for this site that works, and I think if we're not there yet, that with your partnership and the partnership with the planning board, we can get to that project that you will look at and you will be proud of.
I just want to add that I am pleased to see that there are no longer 4-story buildings, because that was one of my concerns the last time.
Yeah, we've got a highway to the south, where we will have a dense vegetated buffer. We've got Hard Road to the east with the hotel. We've got the school and related uses to the north, and we have the ice rink to the west. So bringing us into the center of the site gives us that buffer where we can preserve that large stand of trees and still utilize an existing access off Hard Road and not impact Publishers. And look, if you don't like the recreational component, that was an idea of something that we could add as a community benefit. Not only would it buffer the proposed residential use from the school, provide a transition from that into the residential component, but we thought it would be an amenity that would be appreciated. If it's not an amenity that improves the project, I assume that could be eliminated. But the developer is proposing to build it and then allow public use of it, essentially for free.
Jenny?
Like I said, I love this community, I love my town, but we just worry about it, the traffic flow, and we don't want Webster to be overly developed, and we want it to make it best for our community. And we have, wonderful representation to us. We just hope that we can, cooperate with each other and try to find, balance for everybody. What's best for Webster, that's what we are trying to do. And the traffic, that's what we are worried about. Because when you make a turn on our road, I can't make a turn, I have to make a right turn and then you expect me, because you can't make a left turn.
Well, Webster's lucky to have you, and I think that's wonderful. And if we need to do some more work to give you comfort about the traffic, then that's something that we'll need to do. The study that we provided did indicate there wouldn't be a detrimental impact. And essentially what they did was they looked at the existing levels of service. They did traffic counts. Well, actually, they utilized traffic counts from before the pandemic because we think that that's more accurate to give a better picture. And then they looked at the background of development that's occurred since then. It's all done through modeling, as Matt said. But if the documentation that we provided isn't sufficient to give you that sense of comfort that there won't be a negative impact, then we'll have to go back to the drawing board and provide something additional. I can speak just from experience. Senior housing is a very low traffic generator, and the office proposal that was shown, which could be developed without a PDD, would have significantly more traffic, significantly more than a senior multifamily project. But I understand your concern, and I hope and endeavor that through this process we'll be able to make you comfortable that the traffic generated from this won't negatively impact the community.
So, Charlie, just to kind of tie it up, because believe it or not, gang, we're 34 minutes on this item, which is good. I mean, it warrants that. This is not a flippant decision that any of us want to make. Just so I understand sequentially, we could do this resolution and all we're doing is moving it to the planning board. There is no PD,
Well, no, you basically have to accept the plan and send it to the plan, according to
Accept it as
the 225-21E, point 1E. There's 3 steps, and the first step is review and acceptance of the town board of development. So that's
so
number
what
one.
we would be doing tonight would be tantamount to
Well, effectively, you're accepting the plan.
Gotcha.
And then you send it to the planning board, and then the planning board
the
proceeds as a PD. This is not, we're not talking about the special use permit, which is
Right.
a separate.
Planning board would do their thing,
Right.
sketch, preliminary,
Correct.
public hearing, final, recommendation letter to us. We just went through it, it's fresh in my mind. It ends up back here, depending on how quickly we can get through the planning board in a couple of months, or 6 weeks, or whatever. And I'm gonna go back to what I said.
And let's not
There is
forget
a
the
lot
secret
of,
process.
have you read the minutes, Corey, from 15 months ago?
Yes.
So you have an idea. I will agree with you 100%, it was agreed on 100%. In fact, ex officio board member Barry Dean said, you are right, an office park that fits what the current zoning is would probably, no doubt, have more traffic problems
No question,
than this.
no question.
But it begs the thing, going back to what your timeline was, is that in 2013, when this was approved, and we spent a lot of time on that 2 years ago, is that, well, how can you approve it in 2013 and now somewhat turn tail and say 7 years later you're not going to approve it? Well, the thing is that pretty much 3 or 4 of these type of communities were all approved at the same time. And then once they were built, now you get to actually see the results of them being built. And I get to go over to CDS and visit the citizens there in the apartment complexes as they complain to me about the traffic that comes out on Harbor Road at, not Publishers, but the extension onto that, which is, thank you very much, Josh, okay? All the traffic studies in the world, all the best planning boards in the world, they're approving these things in a vacuum. Each one they're doing in a vacuum. They did about 3 or 4 of them back in 2012 or 13. All of them got built except for yours. And that is what we talked about 2 years ago, is that, well, now we can see with our own eyes what the results of that is. And we said back then, I don't want to sit here and say we got a moratorium on that space. That term was used a little bit because we're like, we need to take a look at this whole corner. We need to look at that corridor and all that and figure out what we're going to do. You reference a comprehensive plan, 14 years old. Next Thursday, Josh is doing a presentation on updating the comprehensive plan at this town board. So there's a confluence of things going on here that, we can talk to we're blue in the face. I don't know. I mean, I will tell you this. I don't like to have any semblance of a spineless decision or lack thereof. I don't know how else to put this, Charlie. I'm not making this motion because I'm trying to be honest with you guys. I think we're going to drag you through a process and get the citizens all riled up in public hearings, and it's going to end up back here, and unless I'm missing something, there's a very good chance you're not going to get that special use permit under that configuration. And what is substantial? It's such a subjective term. Thank you, Councilman Abbott, because when you said how about 140 units? Dang! That's substantial. Now, I don't know if you go to the dictionary and substantial means cutting it by 40%, but if it talks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. That is substantial. But I also appreciate it, and Bill probably appreciates it the most because of the career that he was in. That just might not make sense for you guys. It might not be a profitable venture for you. And we appreciate that. We appreciate where you're coming from. We got to appreciate where we're coming from. So I'm not going to make that motion.
So
Because I don't see, it's either take it under advisement that we gotta go. part of me wants to go and talk to Rich LaFroy and say, Rich, can I make sure I understand something? You're about to open the U of R facility here. And if I understand correctly, he's not selling it off. He's the landlord now. He developed it as a landlord. Is that correct, Josh? Ramirez?
I believe so.
Does he know, with this easement and thing like that, what is the result of now people coming into his tenant, U of R's facility, that now all of a sudden in 2 years might have, there's an access back to 190 units? And what does that do on that private road coming off Hard Road from the right and left and also coming back on Hard Road? Is he gonna be happy with that? Or is it a non-factor? Does he say, I don't care? It's a private road. I mean, people will either turn into the parking lot of U of R or they'll keep going to the 190 units. But as they come out of the 190 units and they're coming this way toward Hard, the people coming out of U of R, I mean, does that create more potential for accidents on that private road?
I think you're gonna have congestion issues.
But who am I to say? I'm not a developer. I wonder what should we take it under advisement? Should I ask, you know, because Rich LaFroy, does he know that you're doing this?
I don't know what Mr. LaFroy knows. I do know that when the applicant sold that parcel, he retained access to his development site. Two very sophisticated developers, they certainly understand when you reserve access rights over a road that you're conveying, that the purpose of that is to give access to the developable land that's immediately adjacent to it. I can't tell you what Mr. LaFroy knows. I would have to assume, when we're talking about two extremely sophisticated developers, yeah, I'm sure that they did. I don't know what he knows.
I don't know either. And I'm not sophisticated, but I
and-
bet you, I don't know Rich that well, but if I just asked him, here's the fact pattern, he's
And
either
that's-
say, yeah, no big deal, or wait a minute.
Yeah, and I'm gonna come back to where I started. I'm not looking for you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. I wanna do this in partnership with the town.
Okay, so Charlie, I just want to make sure we either, I've already said, I don't want to make the motion. It's either, to me, it's a non-starter.
Mr. Supervisor, do you
Yeah.
mind, can I just,
Well, let me just,
Yeah.
I want to make sure our attorney agrees with this is the simplified version of where we're going to go from here.
that's
It's
the point I'd like to
not- Right, that's
address.
where I'm,
That's the point I'd like to
so,
address. So this board
I'll let-
cannot take an action on the PDD until it goes to the planning board for a recommendation, until there's a public hearing, and until SECRA, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, is completed, right? So that's why, when I started, I said one of the things we're looking for is for someone to declare themselves the lead agency, so they can determine, among other things, before anyone takes any action related to this project, whether there will be a potentially significant environmental impact associated with the development. That includes traffic, that includes community character, and all of the other things that are reviewed as part of
and hey,
SECRA.
Corey, you know what? I understand all that. That all happened 2 years ago, and we got right back here on February 4th, going through all of that legal calisthenics
Sure.
and process in 5-0 with a heck of a lot of vote or comments here of why, and we come back to, look, is this correct? And I'll look at both
Sure.
attorneys, okay? Although I hope you understand, Corey, I'm gonna listen to Charlie
As
on
you should.
this one
As
mostly,
you
but I'm sure that you'll, because this is simple. Is these the options tonight for this board? It's a non-starter, and we say, we're not passing it on.
Yes, it's an option.
Option. On the other end of the spectrum, we just read this resolution. It's, I don't want to say punches piloting it over to the planning board. I know exactly how that's going to go, and it will, 6 weeks, 2 months, end up back here for the PDD, seeker, lead agency, whoever does it, all that stuff, all that stuff. We'll be back here for what happened on February 4th, 2021.
Yeah.
For this board to decide if we're giving the PDD and the special use permit. We know how that went 15 months ago, right? So those are the two ends of the spectrum. Now in the middle, did you say something about taking this under advisement? Is that like
Well, I said-
pseudo?
I said, you know, yeah, effectively, so if you want to review the plan further, yeah.
Can I say something? Mr. Auerbach just said that he's not looking for this board to make any decisions on a plan that they're not comfortable with. I will say I'm not comfortable with it.
I already said that.
Okay.
Well, Bill, you're a lot more succinct. I'm not.
And it'd be helpful to understand,
Jay,
you know, what's the discomfort about letting the planning board take a look at the proposal and
I
us
think
receiving their
it goes,
comments?
I think if they let it go to the planning board, then that's a test of approval.
Well, there could be no approval, right? There's no such thing as an approval before secret's complete. They can make a recommendation.
I mean, if you're gonna present it to the planning board just to see what the planning board has to say, that's between you and the planning board, but that does not indicate that the town board in any way is
Absolutely.
referring it or approving it.
Well, we would like to negotiate the town's process. You know it into.
No, I understand,
You know what I mean?
and I would do the same thing.
What we're hoping to do is, these things can be collaborative, okay? We've changed our project in response to the comments that we received before I was ever involved. And now we've come back with something, maybe it's not where it needs to be, and we can get that input from the planning board. If the planning board comes back with a recommendation to the town board doesn't like it, the town board doesn't like it. But that's a risk that we're willing to take. We're asking for the opportunity to go through that process. I think, and maybe I should just listen to the supervisor. Maybe what I'm hearing is there are no set of facts within which this development is going to get approval from this board. And if that's the case, we should just pack up and leave. And that's okay too. But I'm looking at this from 5,000 feet. I came into this with fresh eyes. I had some thoughts and ideas about how maybe an appropriate multifamily residential development might take place on this site. Maybe we're not all the way there yet, but that's what the process is for. That's why there's secret, to allow an analysis of the environmental impacts. If the secret process concludes that there won't be a negative impact as it relates to traffic, I would hope that that means something to the board. Because I get it, you think it's too dense.
The main issue, I think, or your main desire is to have the residential units,
100%.
correct?
Correct.
Okay. That would require a special use permit. To get a special use permit in the OP district for senior housing, the town board has to refer it to the planning board. In order to refer it to the planning board, there has to be a finding by this board that the plan is conceptually, and I'm going to read this right from 225-19.1 subdivision H, so it's on the record. There has to be a finding that the plan is conceptually sound, that it meets a community need. B, that the plan encourages sound development in the interest of safety and the general welfare of the public. And C, the plan shows a development pattern in harmony with the town comprehensive plan. The town board would have to make a finding on each of these to send it to the planning board to look at the special use permit for a recommendation, well, I should say review and or recommendation. That's just a special use permit. Without the special use permit, there can't be housing. Without the housing, there's no development.
But without the PDD, there's no special use permit. So that's why we're starting with the PDD. That's why we're starting with a process where the town board would refer us to the planning board for the purpose of making recommendation on the establishment of a PDD. Mr. Supervisor, if we don't get past that, we got no project. So if it's determined it's not appropriate at the PDD stage, we don't have to go through a long protracted special permit process. You don't have to worry about the customer service to the applicant, and that's what we're looking for. And as I've said a few times, I believe, and what do I know except doing this for 15 years, that there's a project here, that there's something that can work as a multifamily project. If that's not the case, then that's not the case.
I'll tell you,
What's the harm? It's not, what's the harm?
well, I'll put it to you this way, Corey, okay? And you're talented. You're a very good orator. I'm sure you do very well as an attorney. I'm not. I'm more of a business guy. I've been around the block, school of hard knocks. Kick the can down the road. Keep the thing live. It's a good strategy on your guys' part, because maybe we can convince this town board and cajole this and that and change it, whatever. Thing ends up back here at 190 units. I'm going on record right now. I'm not going to vote for a special use permit. So what's the harm? There is no harm. But we're sitting here. I'm trying to be honest. I think Bill is trying
I
to be
appreciate
honest.
your candor. refreshing.
You appreciate the candor, but you know what? You're a good salesman too. You are answering our objections, all right? It's not a sales objection. I think these are sales barriers for all you people who are in sales. Big difference. I see this as a sales barrier. It's not going to come through here at the end and come out of the sausage grinder with a special use permit. Now, if you want to negotiate and navigate the process and partnership and collaborate and all those great words, and they're great words, we can have wonderful discussion, which we have had for 45 minutes now, but I don't know how else to say this. And I can't speak for the other board members. John Cahill's not here. He may feel very differently on this. I'm only one vote. I can't see anything in here that if it comes back by this desk, unless I got sunburned that day and I'm not thinking correctly, in this fact pattern and all that, I'm not voting for a special use permit. I voted on this 15 months ago.
I get it. But the question, that what I hope to do as part of this process is understand why. Why is this density bad? Density is a good thing. Density is desired. When I do projects, what we want is appropriate density. Appropriate density is what drives communities. It's what puts people in stores. Appropriate density that doesn't have negative impacts is what every community wants. That's why I'm looking at this. I'll admit, my experience in the town of Webster is very limited. But I've done projects all across the state, and this is a good project. I get it. You don't like traffic. You're concerned about traffic. Let's see what we can do to ameliorate.
Do you know that
those
15 months ago, I remember this, Bill, we said it is a good project. It's in the wrong place.
I think it's in a great place, and if
We agree to disagree.
well, let me explain why. We can agree to disagree. That's fine. You can tell me to shut up, and I'll sit down.
Nope.
But let me tell you why.
We're getting to a point where we got to do something.
What are we
Keep
doing?
going.
What are we doing to make this a great site? First of all, we removed the traffic off Publishers Parkway. That was a non-starter. I agree with the town board on that. That needed to be done. Then we cluster the development into the center of the site, where we can preserve as much of the existing dense tree, it's very densely treed back there, to create a buffer from the adjoining uses. What are the adjoining uses? We've got school district property to the north, right? Which I came up with an idea. Let's do a recreational amenity. Development is about creating appropriate transitions. Let's transition to the north from the school to a dense but appropriately dense residential development. To the west, we have the hockey arena, which will be buffered with trees, where we're going to put the walking path that's going to connect the school to the Route 104 trail network, which I think is a great amenity. To the east, we have a hotel. I think it's a 4-story hotel. I could be wrong. 4-story hotel immediately to the east. And to the south, we have the highway. So this site, when we've programmed it and with the modifications that we made before, accessing off an existing access point, private road, doesn't need town services, senior housing, very minimal impacts associated with senior housing, and it's buffered. It's a great project.
So Corey, let me ask you this, and we'll probably want to end this. Where do you live?
I live in North Buffalo, in the city of Buffalo, New York.
Okay. I live in Webster. And I will tell you this, from boots on the ground, all the things that you just said are around there, almost every Webster person, 8-year-old to 80-year-old, is basically saying there's one or two things too many in that area. Is that a safe thing to say? Now, go ahead, Betty.
I just want to say that I think we should not confuse density with numbers. Because at the end of the day, no matter what the density is, no matter how many acres you're using and how many you're not and keeping green, we still have 190 units in there, okay? The other thing is that certainly as a board, it's our responsibility to look at these things and try to work with you, try to be cooperative and collaborative and all those things. But in addition to our comments from that meeting back in February, are 2.5 pages of residents' comments. And we have to be responsible to our residents as well. And I don't see anyone who's in favor of it. I can guarantee you that if we move this forward, we continue down this road, we will end up with it coming back here. The very same people will be in this room, and we'll go through this entire exercise all over again. Because they're not really impressed with 190 instead of 194 either.
Can you help me to understand the concern about 190 units? Just, what is it about the 190 units that's problematic?
Can I,
It's a
Corey,
minimum of 190 cars
Corey, I'll put it to you another
coming
way.
out of private drive onto a very busy road.
That's a great concern. We had a traffic study prepared by a traffic engineer.
You had a traffic study prepared, that we understand that.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna have a traffic study, it's gonna be done by an independent firm, not associated with Passport,
Let's do that.
okay?
Let's do
But
that.
I'm not gonna forward this, because in my opinion, it's too much in that parcel, the way you have it right now. You did not, in my opinion, you did not substantially change from the original one of the 190 units using all the land. The only thing you've done is, now you filled in the northern part as an open field. So you moved everything down, now you got 190 units from 194 into a much,
So
Smaller.
if an independent traffic engineer prepares a report for you that says 190 units of senior housing will have no detrimental impact on traffic, would that help relieve that concern that you have? An expert that you
If you will
choose.
not believe you in mine, I'm gonna say it again, Corey, I get it, and you're good, by the way. You did a very good job hiring him, or whoever did, okay? Very good. I'm gonna say it again, I'm a layman. With hindsight, I think the planning board, the town board, certainly the community, there's probably one, and maybe too many projects in that area. Why would we want to parley onto a mistake? We can't go and tear down things. We now see what the result is. So your traffic study would come in and say, okay, yeah, it's not going to create any additional. Well, the traffic study might not tell you is that, well, the thing's already a problem. And the town board has talked about it, like, we're going to have to go in and look at Publishers Parkway and Hard Road and because we've now built this stuff, and you can't tear it down. Why would we want to parley onto that problem by putting 190 more units in
I'll
there?
tell you why.
When we, now this guy is good.
I'll tell you
Here we
why.
go, but I'll tell you what,
I'll tell you why.
your chariot's about to turn into a pumpkin, because we are at 56 minutes on this subject.
I'll tell you why, because if the traffic situation is already bad, and this project is not going to make it any worse, then think about all the benefits that come from an appropriately scaled senior development that's going to bring density and bring people to your commercial district. It's going to bring tax revenue. If it doesn't make the bad situation worse, what's the beef? I keep going back to why. Tell me why you don't like this. Let me tell you why that's not an issue. And if I can't
Corey,
do
I
that,
could explain to you 72 whys, we've already explained 70. You are very talented, you will have an answer for each one. You gotta say, the up and coming attorneys, they're good, all right?
whether or not I'm
Because
the
you will have an
project-
answer, you will have an answer to every why I give you. Or we're not gonna sit here all night and give all those
That's
whys.
fair,
I
Mr.
feel
Supervisor.
as
I
though we
respect your
have
time.
given some whys.
I respect your time, and I
Yeah.
respect the input of the town board.
And I
What I'm
just was
saying is, if there's not, if there's an issue and we can't address it then the project won't move forward, right? But if you tell me the issue is traffic, and then you get a traffic report from an independent traffic engineer that says that's not an issue, then what's the issue?
I'll tell you what the issue is, and this is it. Two things. One, to me, it's the same exact thing that was here 15 months ago. You can talk all day long about how substantial it is. We agree to disagree. It's not substantial. I'm with Councilman Abbott on that. And two is that, I said it before, one of you board members want to make a motion on pushing this ahead to the planning board, knock yourselves out. It isn't going to be Supervisor Flair.
well, it's not gonna be Councilman Abbott either.
Well, you're actually getting a majority.
So what do we do, Charlie? Is it a non-vote? It's just a, what do we put in the records? That the board listened for an hour, and it's in the, I mean, a lot of robust stuff. We're not doing anything right now. Is that
You're not
what it
taking
is?
any action.
We're not taking any action. Is it? Do you want to make a motion to pass this along?
I was only here 15 months ago, so
Do you want to make a motion tonight on this configuration, in this resolution, a motion to pass it along to the planning board?
well, I listened to what you have to say and everything, and right now, what's important is the community. And again, maybe the site that you chose is not, good for you guys. Maybe you could find some other place. Or, you know what I mean? So, like, I'm real estate. I'm sitting here and I understand it. I have to listen to my constituents, which is the people that voted for me to be here. And the traffic is like really, really big concern. And, right now, my colleagues already see what, best for the community. So I guess I have to say, my vote is probably gonna be with them this time. But we will like to, try to
I
work
appreciate
together
that.
and-
I appreciate that. The supervisor's concerned about the customer service, and I'm standing here telling you, if we go through that process and we get back here and it doesn't move forward, then so be it. But we'd at least like the opportunity to advance the proposal, continue to get input, continue to work collaboratively, and if that's not something the board's willing to do, then I'll shut up and I'll sit down.
Well, Jenny, I think you're not making the motion from there, I'm not, you're not. Charlie, there's no action on
There's no
this.
action.
The board is not making a motion to refer this to the planning board for the hour and 1 minute of things that are in the record of what we've discussed. All right?
And I assume that that's without prejudice, right? If we want to come back and we want to talk again, maybe not for an hour, that's the town board will entertain.
I like it. I do like it, Charlie. Let me tell you something, all right? It has no prejudice from me. But I'm going to say one last thing that, now that you say that, there are people in this town that are in planning and community development and all that have been working with you, and they said to me when this came in, we said come in with something very substantial, and they're like, well, I don't know, that doesn't look substantial. And I don't want you to take that out of context like that. Influenced me, but I think these people are working with you, Passero, and with the developer, trying to guide you on what might get through this process. And I'm just going to lay it out there, because if you want us to be without prejudice, here's a suggestion. Those people who are talented that work for the town, if they're working with you, Matt, or they're working with you, or they're working with Taylor, you might want to listen to them, because they tend to have a good gauge on what the planning board and what the town board has
Understood.
in their minds. And in my opinion, the last 15 months, that is not what transpired. And we got here with that not being listened to, and we had spent an hour and 2 minutes on it, and you might say to yourself that, no prejudice, come back, but you might want to take some advice from them next time.
That's great advice.
All right.
I appreciate it, and in the spirit of collaboration, I hope to have an opportunity to come back and present to you again.
I hope you do too, Corey, because you're fun.
All right, thank you very much.